Hello guys, Moscow and 13 more other Russian regions were visited by the Ukrainian drones who came there to demilitarize evil military production sites and to send a message to the population of Russia. You better stop this war. And people are panicking. What do they do when they are nervous? Turn on the TV and they see that Putin himself is panicking together with the most important famous Russian propagandist, and all because of the new sanctions that lead to more problems for two of Russia's largest oil companies already devastated by the Ukrainian drone sanctions. In the context of this bad news for the Kremlin, the central bank decided to cut their interest rate again, trying to control their inflation. And Russians understand the inflation is eating their money. That's why more and more production sites stop working. And for the first time since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they actually cut down the production on the military plants, which demonstrates our combo economic sanctions, drone sanctions works perfectly to implement the only working peace plan, and that is to defeat and demilitarize Russia. And we also demilitarized it close to Kherson region by destruction of two Russian radio location systems Nebo and one missile system Buk, which saves a lot of lives of people in Kherson, in Crimea, in Zaporizhia, and makes Russia even more vulnerable to more Ukrainian strikes on the legitimate target. So let's discuss what is happening when Russia is literally collapsing from different sides. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see Putin in The Hague, subscribe, I'm sure we will discuss that on the channel sometime really soon. So drones visiting Russian RIA is not something new, and by the way, I believe Trump warned that any long-range strikes inside Russia won't be the American strikes. Is the reason because he knows we develop our homemade weapons and this is coming. Because just a year ago it was always very unusual if the residents of Moscow could hear some sirens of air raid alerts, and now it is their new normal. Well, the new normal they invited themselves when they cheered for the so-called special military operation and failed to predict that it would also take place on their territory. So Moscow and 13 more Russian regions were under the attack of Ukrainian drones that keep targeting legitimate military production facilities. Airports traditionally closed, people are panicking because, well, they hear sirens and they also read the news how badly Russian air defense is working to protect strategic places, starting with oil refineries and finishing with arsenals. I don't always focus on that, but there are cases when Russian air defense targets their own buildings, their own facilities, because they did not plan. They would need to protect themselves on the Russian side. But the war changes a lot, and after Putin's failed blitzkrieg, the failure of the Russian Federation is coming. And a very good proof of that despite all the efforts, despite all the violence and madness that we see in the speeches of the Kremlin politicians, they need to cut down the production on their military plants, on their military facilities, all because of the empty budget and all because of the inflation that is growing and more restrictions imposed by the countries of the European Union, of the United States. And I'm forever grateful for your active position that you demonstrate, talking about Ukraine, reminding people about the need to defeat Russia and thus to protect the international law and order, which is important not just for us here in Ukraine. And these new sanctions imposed by the White House, by the European Union, totally devastated Russian propagandists who at the beginning did not think something could happen or something even worse could happen to the Russian oil refining industry, but that's the new reality. Putin in his videos looked very disappointed, literally frightened. He kept saying the sanctions won't influence him that much. Well, maybe him personally not, but millions and millions of Russians will definitely feel the growing inflation, the empty budget, and perhaps the deposits frozen. You know, winter, everything is freezing. Subscribe to witness the collapse of the Russian economy and share these videos to spread the truth. This helps a lot, and I'm very grateful if you push the notification button and follow the updates, because not enough truth is on YouTube, especially when talking about Ukraine, Russia, and this part of the world that seemed very far away for many of you. So Russians are frightened, Putin is frightened, and propagandists are actually talking about the need to end this war because it destroys the Russian budget. I remember how at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they all hoped Ukraine would collapse in 3 days. Then when they failed, they started saying it's a war against NATO, when we all know it's a war with your help, but definitely not with NATO soldiers on the ground. The only foreign soldiers were introduced by Russia, and they came from North Korea. So this tremendous failure of Putin, their inability to analyze the situation, the people of Ukraine, their own army, their own budget led to serious deficits and problems, and now their budget is empty with the destroyed oil refining industry, Rosneft, Putin's personal wallet, Lukoil sanctioned, and more problems amassing. That's why the head of the central bank, Nibulina, decided to cut this interest rate in an effort to slow down the inflation. Inflation stagnation right now is eating Russia from inside, and the majority of economists understand, the Russian economists understand, there is nothing they can do. They keep speaking about that openly on forums, on the news, and Russian propagandists, curse them, saying that people inside the Russia's economy sector are guilty. Not Putin, not this failing idea, not war, but the head of the central bank is to blame. I personally believe it's good that they are so far away from their reality, and this will only speed up the collapse and won't let them take the adequate steps. And Dmitriev, who is a special envoy of Putin, now rushes to the United States to speak with Witkoff, who is definitely not an expert and not a professional, and all of his efforts, thank God, failed. And actually these new sanctions imposed are the result of his failed efforts and of all the good people in the United States, in the European Union, and in every part of the world speaking the truth about Russia and Ukraine. I'm very grateful. These are you. Thank you so much. Love you. So I'm not sure this visit will change anything, especially after Putin started negatively commenting on Trump instead of compliments. He said these sanctions will lead to higher prices, and a new political season is beginning in the United States. But as far as I understand, Trump is prepared to drill more in the US. But even without this decision, OPEC countries want to produce more oil. They have everything to do it. So literally no one will notice that Russian oil production will collapse, because not only these economic sanctions will keep destroying Lukoil, Rosneft, Gazprom, but also Ukrainian drone sanctions. And Ukrainian drone sanctions demilitarized 2 huge radio location systems, Nebo, that Russians were using on the front lines, and 1 more missile system, Buk, that Russians were also using in that southern direction. And this means safer territories and lots of innocent lives saved in the direction of Kherson, in the direction of Zaporizhia and Crimea. Russians were not prepared to defend themselves. They are failing, and I believe millions of those who cheered for this war now understood they destroy Russia from inside. But the government, the so-called government, the supreme Kremlin goblin Putin keep pretending that everything is fine. And in this case, it is actually good, because by not reacting, by not doing what is necessary in such a tragic moment of the Russian economy, they just speed up the process of the collapse, first of the Russian economy and then of the Russian Federation. And Russian military vloggers are super angry. Even those who cheered for this war, who began this war, now realize it's time to surrender. It's time to surrender, Putin, and if you want to witness him in The Hague and I don't know where else, but not in a good place, subscribe. I'm sure we will talk about that on the channel sometime really soon. And also follow Anna Danilchuk channel, where we talk more about my memories and reflections, and follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, all the links in the description of this video, same as the link to our merch shop with lots of good items that work well as reminders, conversation starters about Ukraine, and turn you into very important, very precious ambassadors of Ukraine that remind the world Russia can and will be defeated. Thank you for being friends of mine, friends of Ukraine, and Slava Ukraini!